Combat is one of the best and most rewarding aspects in all of Ghost of Tsushima, and while things never get Sekiro level tough, enemies in this game are no simple walk in the Kushi grasslands either. So with that said, here are 8 tips to help you survive Ghost of Tsushima's combat. Number 1, learn the basics. The fundamentals of Ghost of Tsushima's combat are as follows. The quick attacks on the square button are fast but easily blocked, your heavy attacks are slow but will always deal stagger damage if you're using the correct stance against the correct enemy, you can block most attacks unless you see a red X appear before them, and attacks that can't be blocked can be dodged with a quick dash on the circle button. If you just hold block and don't try to time it, it'll be a standard block that will push you back and won't interrupt your opponent's combo. If you press block a little bit before the enemy attack hits you, you'll parry them and cause them to stumble, allowing you to do some free counterattacks. And if you have the upgrade purchased, if you time your block just before an enemy hits you, you'll do a Sekiro-esque perfect parry and counterattack. Combat in Ghost of Tsushima is generally pretty defensive focused, as most enemies will block your quick attacks if you just throw them out mindlessly. Which leads us to... don't mash. Look, I get it. I get why you might be tempted to mash the quick attack button in Ghost of Tsushima. Maybe you think it'll turn you into Hiei and you'll just do a slash for every press of the button. Or maybe you think that if you just keep on attacking, you won't give your enemy any time to counterattack. But here's what actually happens when you try and mash. Mashing is a very bad idea for 2 main reasons. One, as I said earlier, enemies are very adept at blocking quick strikes if you just throw them out there out of nowhere, and when you get blocked, you'll be put in a very vulnerable position. 2, if you're just thinking about attacking as fast as you can, you're likely not thinking about defending against other enemies surrounding you. So instead of mashing, get into the habit of just doing 1 to 2 hit combos whenever you have an opening, then be ready to react to whatever another enemy might do. Prioritize those archers. Ooh boy, archers suck in this game. They can hit you from off screen, they have deadly accuracy, some of them can poison you, and some of them can fire 3 to 4 shots before needing to take a break. Archers should always be your first priority in any fight, primarily because they're incredibly distracting to deal with when you're already fighting 4 to 5 melee weapon enemies, but also because they're super easy to kill. They can't defend against your attacks, and they go down in just 2 to 3 hits. If you're unable to get to an archer and have to deal with their arrows, note that they always have an audio tell before they're going to shoot. And as soon as you hear that, that's when you need to either dodge or bring up your guard if you have the ability to block arrows. Thieves and other types of enemies have different audio tells, but it's largely the same deal. Know your stances. Over the course of the game, you'll learn 4 stances, each with their own strength versus a specific type of weapon. The starting stone stance is adept at dealing with swordsmen, both of the single and dual wielding variety. The water stance is good at breaking through the guards of shield wielding enemies, wind stance can easily knock down and kill spear wielding enemies, and the moon stance is virtually required to stagger the big brutish enemies. Switching between these stances is an absolute must in the mid to later combat encounters of Ghost of Tsushima, so it's very important to know which stance does what. Just think of it like this. Each of the face buttons corresponds to a different stance, right? X is like 2 crossing swords, so it's the stance for dealing with swords. Circle looks like a shield, so it's the stance for dealing with shields. Triangle is like the tip of a spear, which makes it the stance to deal with spears, and the brutes are big and boxy, like a square. Easy. Standoff tips. Standoffs are a very important aspect of combat because they allow you to not only thin the number of enemies you have to ultimately fight against, but also because a successful standoff refills your resolve meter, which is vital to keep you alive because it's how you heal and use special moves. As the game goes on, enemies will try and throw you off by feinting. If you're having trouble dealing with these feints, what you can do is keep your eyes focused on their feet. They'll try to trick you by moving their hands and shouting, but their feet will always remain stationary until they're actually going for real. Slow down time. If you find yourself a bit overwhelmed in a fight, one thing you can do is utilize a little bit of slowdown by holding the R2 button to bring up the stance switch menu. One helpful tactic is to bring it up as soon as you deliver a fatal blow on an enemy and use the slowdown time to identify what the next target you need to take out is and switch to an appropriate stance. Use all of your tools. Jin's various combat tools are extremely useful in a variety of different ways. The kunai can break enemy stances, allowing you to get a free hit, or they can just kill weak enemies outright, like Mongol dogs, archers, or enemies that you've already done a bunch of damage to. Smoke bombs are extremely useful whenever you get overwhelmed to pause the action and get a few free stealth kills while you're at it. Sticky bombs can be very powerful when leveled up and can outright kill enemies that you hit, and running away briefly to clump a large group of enemies together and using a black powder bomb is always an effective strategy. Where to spend your points. The technique tree in Ghost of Tsushima can be a little overwhelming with the sheer amount of options that you have right out of the gate. My general recommendation is to try and get deep into the deflection skill tree as quick as you can. Being able to block certain otherwise unblockable attacks and being able to block arrows is especially helpful all throughout the game, and becomes nearly indispensable once you get past Act 1. Beyond the deflection skill tree, everything else is pretty much up to your own playstyle or dependent on what enemies are giving you trouble. There's not much of a reason to invest in the exploration skills early on because you can pretty organically discover hot springs, bamboo strikes, Shinto shrines, and fox shrines thanks to the yellow birds and the various subtle cues in the environment that allow you to spot them from a distance. Always follow smokestacks, torii gates, and yellow birds, and you should never find yourself hurting for collectibles. And that's all I've got! Thanks for watching, and for more Ghost of Tsushima, make sure to check out our video on the things that the game doesn't tell you, along with my review. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.